Okay, good morning, everyone. Today's tidbit, we're going to do a little bit more educational thing. And some of you may know this, some of you may not. So if you know this and you're bored, yeah, go away. But anyways, we've talked about before about coping borders, and that's C-O-P-I-N-G, coping borders. And basically what it means is it's going to help you cope with any problems that you may run into. A lot of times this is used if you're using a panel of some sort, but there are other applications. So we've got two new quilts for you this week that we're going to show you. And I'm going to just, first of all, we're going to go back to, this is one we did a week or two ago. And this is a very good example because this is the one that Marty did her own design. So she started out, we had this really nice little panel thing here. And then she had her disappearing 4-patch, right? 9-patch, whatever. So she had her disappearing block here that she wanted to fit this. So in order to make this panel work, she had to put a border on it that would cope with the problem of these two blocks. So it's a little bit of math, but there's a very easy way to show you how.
But you guys are getting good at math, so
yeah, right.
We're all good.
Well, I'm not good at math, so I'm going to show you the easy way to do it. So anyways, so that's what a coping border is. Now, so that's the older one. This is the brand new one we just did this week, and I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. This one is called
Sweet World, no.
Blossom and Grow. This one is called Blossom and Grow, and this is the little panel that came with it, so that it's a small one. And we'll come back and talk more about it later. But again, this is my coping border to take care of making sure that this little panel block fit my star block. So that's the coping border on that one. Now this one is a new one that we have that is called Sweet World. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, Sweet World. So it's this big panel in the middle, and then you've got, we have teal and teal. Here's the teal border that is your coping border to make sure that when you get that border on, this pieced border from here to here is going to fit, because there's nothing more disappointing when you go to put that border on and it doesn't fit. Okay, so let's talk about panels and sometimes what are the problems you run into. Lots of times when they print panels, they have little, it's upside down, but that doesn't matter. They have little borders around them, and I'm sure it's just, there's a reason for it, but I don't know what it is. So there's that border, and what they usually tell you to do is cut out your block to say equal 5 inches. So cut it out 5 inches, and then when you take your 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew it to the next block, you're hoping that that brown strip doesn't show. Nothing is worse, well, worse than what I just said, and if you can look at this close up, Marty.
I was going to say 95% of the time.
Yeah.
They're wrong.
What happens is, see what happens? I did a very good 1/4 inch. I did a 1/4 inch on that, and you see that little brown thing, and that makes me nuts. Because you don't want that to show. That looks horrible. And the problem is if you sew it from this side, yeah, you can avoid that brown by taking a wider seam, but then you have made your block a different size. So you have got to be able to fix that. So that's one example. This is another one, and this one isn't a big problem, but again, this was what we were told to cut the block. And see, sometimes because they don't print them perfectly, they're not all perfect.
And that's just the nature of the beast. It's
yes,
not anything against the designers of the fabric company. It's just the nature of the beast.
Exactly. So you see how it's wider here than it is here. So when you go to stitch a strip on that, it's going to look pooey. So, and you see how over here it shows.
Is that an official term?
That's an official term, pooey, yeah.
Okay.
So we've got to figure out how we can get rid of that and still maintain the size of our block. All right, so when I was doing this one, this is the little block that you start out with, and it has a very, very pale pink, I'm hoping you're going to be able to see that, very, very pale pink border around it. And so I went through and I cut my block exactly like they told me to. And then again, because of the problems you have with it being a little giga, and what I ended up doing, just because I was starting to get
frustrated,
obnoxious that I did it about that, is I went in and see this line right here. That's what I used for my measuring line. So I put my half inch, well, when I finally figured out what I wanted to do, I went in and I put my 1/2 inch line on that little yellow gold line, and that way I knew at least my block was going to be, everyone was going to be the same.
It was going to be straight with your motif.
Right, that's, yeah, good point. That's a better way to say it. So in doing that though, that meant that my block is now going to be smaller than because it was supposed to be cut 6.5. Now it's going to be smaller. So, oh no, what do? We put a coping border on it. All right. So what I did is I went through and I made these exactly what I felt that they should be. So I put my 1/2 inch mark on that and I started whacking these puppies up. And I didn't care what was going on out there because as long as it was beyond my 1/4 inch seam allowance, it was not going to be a problem. So
a lot of the times the instructions that when there's, especially with panels, instructions with panels, they do a coping border.
Some companies, some don't.
Right. But I guess the thing is like Terry was saying, sometimes even the size that they're having you cut the panel is really not that good.
Possible.
I mean, you might need to cut it a little bit smaller just because of printing differentiations.
So I ended up, instead of being 6.5, this block is 6 3/8, which is not bad at all.
And don't be scared about the 3/8 because right now it doesn't matter.
And the other thing is too, this is supposed to be a square. Now when I measured off that little gold line, this is 6 1/4 this way, 6 3/8 inches that way. So again, it's not perfectly true, which in the big picture of life, but it is the nature of the beast. So this is what we're going to do. And a lot of the patterns, they will tell you, they may not call it a coping border, but you'll get the idea after we get going here. So what we did on this one, as you see, I put a little border around each one. Now, some of the patterns will tell you too, and this is minutia, but you got to realize, they'll say, okay, when you're cutting, you're going to cut 2 strips that are 6.5, and then 2 strips that are whatever the next one is. Well, 6.5 isn't going to work for you. So what I just did is, remember the old Eleanor Burns days when you took a strip, the old log cabin, you took a strip and you put the block on it and you just sewed block, 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 and you whack it off? That's what I do. Don't worry about if it's not 6.5. So you end up with...
At this point, perfection is not required. Perfection is coming.
Perfection is coming. That's a good way to put it. So this is what we ended up with. Now, say for example that this block is supposed to be, because I'm adding 2 inches to each side, so it should be 6, so it should be 10. But let's, for kicks and giggles, say it was only supposed to be 8.5. All right. So this block was supposed to be 8.5, and it is not. So what I'm going to do...
Can I back you up for just one second? When you're adding these coping borders on, you're not trying to figure out exactly what size these strips have to be to bring you up to the size that you need to be. You're oversizing them intentionally.
Exactly, to cope with the problem.
Right.
Yes.
So that's the whole idea, is that you're going to oversize these borders and then trim everything to its correct size. So kind of think of that when you're working with these panels, that you might need to add an extra 1/4, 1/2 inch to the size that they're giving you, just to make your life easier.
Yes. So you're going to add it to that little border. And you know what? An extra 1/4, 1/2 inch will make your life so much better. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make this into an 8.5 inch block. Now there's a couple different ways to do it, but I'm going to just show you the way I like to do it. So take 8.5, here's your math, divide it in 2. That's 4 1/4, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take this block and I'm going to very carefully line up my seams. And I'm going to take my ruler, putting it on my fold over here. I'm going to cut that down to 4 1/4, because remember 4 1/4 and 4 1/4 is 8.5.
And you want your cut size, not a finished size.
Correct. Right. Then we're going to do, because we've done 2 sides, let's do the other 2 sides. Same thing, making sure all my seam allowances are lined up. And again, we're going for the 4 1/4, which will be right about there. So now we have our perfect 8.5 inch block. These may be just a hair different, but in the big picture of life, it will not matter. Because if your block isn't perfect, you can't make them perfect. You can't reweave it. So that's how we do coping borders. So that's what I did on this one. I cut my little things on the gold line and I made sure they all look the same. So that's a coping border. So was there anything else we want to talk about coping borders?
Well, I did want to, we had, somebody had written in a comment about this quilt and wondering how we figured out how to do this. Could you take that one paper, Terry, and flip it over for a second?
Do you want me to take the camera?
No, it's fine. It's not going to be that long. So when we did these, the finished block on these, I'll just take the stand here, was this guy right here. And those were finishing at 6.5 inches. So I knew that I had to make increments of 6.5 inches, which I kind of did you a cheat sheet here. See, the blocks finished at 6.5, so one block would be 6.5, 2 blocks would be 13, 3 blocks would be 19.5, 4 blocks would be 26. So what I did here is these smaller guys, I think, were 10 inches. So my next increment on that one, the closest one, would be 13 inches. So I knew that I had to bring those guys up to 13 inches, and then it was just a matter of math. So, and then on the big guy, I think that one was like an 18-inch. That's why the borders on that one are narrower than the other guy. Because if you look at the little cheat sheet, 19.5 is the closest increment to that. So I just had to bring that block up to 19.5. And then it was just a matter of laying out around. So that's kind of how we designed that guy.
And I just thought of a couple more points I wanted to talk about coping borders. Some people, and I was going to take the time and try to rustle through my stuff, and I didn't. If you have, say, a whole bunch of leftover blocks that would possibly go together for a scrap quilt, but none of them are the same size, this is how you could cope with that. You could take all of your blocks and make a sampler.
Right.
Just add a random background or a sashing type of thing. You could put all of you, if you have one block from each quilt or whatever, you could use them up that way. So that's another good way to do it. Another thing too is if you have a pattern that calls for a specific panel and you don't have that specific panel, then fine. Cut it, make sure it fits the size of the original one. Because if you loved this outside border but didn't like this panel, had a different panel to put in it, all you would have to do is make sure that that panel came up to this size. So you could do a lot of mixing, matching that way. Okay, now I want to talk about this one just a couple minutes because we have talked about stencils before, but this is something I like to harp on. How you can utilize stencils for more than just one project. When we were starting to think about how to quilt this, your first instinct is, okay, we're just going to go through and ditch everything. Yep, that worked. So I went through and ditched everything. But then you've got little puffies that you've got to deal with. So Marty and I decided hearts would be a really good theme for this. So I went to our stencils and I started looking for hearts. So my first one I found was this stencil. This is a good one. And what I did is did I use this one? Maybe I didn't use that one.
No, you did,
no.
Because didn't you say it was the bottom?
It was this one.
that guy.
It was this one, yes. My glasses are sliding down my nose, making me crazy. Excuse me.
Well, thank you for sharing.
I know, I'm sorry. Well, when I looked up and I have no glasses on, I wonder what happened. So what I did, and you probably aren't going to be able to see this.
No, I could.
Could you?
Yep.
Okay. So what I did is I took this outside heart and I centered it on my block here. And then there's this little tiny heart in the middle. I just centered that on the inside of the heart, and that filled it. Because if I hadn't done that center one, it would have
had a poofy.
It would have been, it would have potted out, and it would not have been attractive. So again, I used different parts, and actually, really quick, when you put this on, the stencil doesn't have a bottom part, but you can easily take one of the other parts and move it around, and it worked perfectly. So that's one of the stencils I used. Then the other thing I did was, and this is an old stencil. I don't know if it's even around, but this is a great, and I tried to find it and I didn't. But if you have it in your arsenal, this works perfectly for my outside border. So I had to do a little fudging, which we've talked about how to do, and I got that on there, and that worked really nice, except for after I got it all done, there was this big space in here that was poofing out, which I couldn't stand. So I went back to my other little stencil, and I did a little teeny tiny heart. Can you see that from there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a little teeny tiny heart in the center of each one of those things. And it
If
really
you'd have done it in colored thread, I would have been able to see it.
I had planned to do the quilting in colored thread, but I was, as I told somebody, I was like the horse headed for the barn. And I just didn't think, and I just kept quilting, and I got like a whole side done and said, oops, and I was not going backwards. So anyways, so that's my little quilting tip for this one. It was very easy to quilt. This is like a Sunday afternoon quilting job. It really wasn't tough. So that's our coping border situation that we wanted to talk to you about. Now, the other thing we wanted to do is we figured, we haven't done anything fun in a while, so what we decided to do is we're going to put some of our rotary cutter blades on sale. So we're doing the Olfa 60 millimeter blades. They come 1 to a pack. They are normally, I don't know what, but they are going to be on sale for
normally what is it, $14.30?
No,
$15.50.
$15.50. We're putting it on sale for $12.50, so that's $3 savings per pack. And then the 45 millimeter, the 2-pack, normally sell for $17.50. We're putting those on sale for $14.50. So basically, we're taking $3 off each pack. So that'll give you a little incentive to stock up for your I was going to say the long winter, but no, it's going to be the hot summer we're getting ready to stock up for. So I think
we just encourage you to change your rotary blades because we're just as guilty as you
yes,
about
we
it.
Are.
So
yes, we are, absolutely. So I think that's all we wanted to talk about this week. If you have any questions, you know where we are. If not, we'll see you next week. Oh, wait a minute. Should we say Happy Easter? Yeah, because this will be coming out Holy Week.
Just before Easter.
Yes, so have a happy and wonderful Easter. Bye-bye. Oops, we forgot something. So we were supposed to give you prices. And this quilt over here, this is the fabric in the kit, comes with all the fabric for the top and the binding. And this one is, I can't even remember, 60. And then this little guy right here, because it is the cutest backing, which goes with the line, we included the backing with the kit. The line is called, what is it called? Blossom and Grow. Well, we should have known that. So this is the backing. So we did include the backing on this one. And so that kit is going to be $55, and that'll include all the fabric, basically for the whole quilt. Right. Top, binding, and backing. So hopefully that's all we needed to add on.
Done now.
Okay, bye.